Before this video starts, if you enjoy this video, there are many more like it already on the channel, with many more like it to come in the future, so subscribe. I am trying to reach 125,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so I would really appreciate it. I upload 6 days a week on this channel, so if you're looking for some consistent basketball talk, this is the place for it. Also, drop a like on this video. It only takes 1 second and it makes a massive difference. Today we are talking about the Eastern Conference Finals matchup between the Miami Heat and the Boston Celtics. This is certainly an interesting matchup, and I do want to point out, if you haven't heard it already, this is the first time in NBA history that there has been a conference finals matchup between two teams that were neither the 2 seed or the 1 seed. So good for both of these teams. The Toronto Raptors were frauds, and we're going to be talking about that in a video tomorrow, because I'm going to be talking about Pascal Siakam. Did not have time to write a script because I slept like 6 hours in the middle of the day. But talking about this series, I feel like a lot of people are just going in this one assuming it's the Miami Heat that are going to win, and I really don't know why. I think people are overblowing Miami's ceiling because they beat Milwaukee in the fashion that they did, but in reality, I really think that was more of a factor of how well they matched up against the Milwaukee Bucks, rather than how great of a team they are against any other team. Like, the Boston Celtics are not a good matchup for the Miami Heat. The Milwaukee Bucks were a perfect matchup for the Miami Heat in terms of how they matched up against them, because the Bucks allow a lot of three-pointers, and Giannis is prone to get shut down by defenders in the archetype of Bam Adebayo, and the Miami Heat have a good defense for shutting down Giannis. Now, that being said, I expected the Bucks to overcome that matchup difference, and the Miami Heat no doubt played at a ridiculously impressive level. However, let's not just dismiss the Boston Celtics in winning this series. As a matter of fact, to give you a heads up to my prediction already, I think Boston is going to win this series. And the reason why is because Boston is not a good matchup for the Miami Heat like the Milwaukee Bucks were, even if the Milwaukee Bucks were a better team. As for why, well, basically, the Heat were able to shut down the Bucks because they had a very simplistic offense and they did not have a lot of shot creation. The Boston Celtics have some of the best shot creators in terms of overall, like, longest list of shot creators. Like, there is Jason Tatum, then there is Kemba Walker, then there is Jaylen Brown, then there is Gordon Hayward, and even Marcus Smart gets on the action occasionally. So the Boston Celtics have a long list of guys that can create offense for themselves. With the Milwaukee Bucks, it was Giannis who was getting shut down, Middleton, who was great in that series, and then Eric Bledsoe, who is... He wasn't bad in comparison to what he normally is, but he's like, if Eric Bledsoe is your third best shot creator, you have a little bit of an issue. And then on the offensive end, the Milwaukee Bucks had a great defense, but they allowed a lot of three-pointers. The Boston Celtics also have a pretty great defense, but they do not allow that many three-pointers. Not as good as Milwaukee's was in the regular season, but in terms of a matchup, I think the Bucks were a better matchup for the Heat offensively and defensively. In the case of the Celtics, a lot of shot creation on the perimeter, no reliance on a guy that can't score outside of the paint, and they're not going to be allowing buckets the way that the Milwaukee Bucks did. So, as a result, this is not the same. And actually, I think this is going to be a much more difficult matchup for the Miami Heat than the Bucks, which is wild to say. But really, I think the Bucks beat themselves more than the Heat beat them. Not to take the credit away from the Miami Heat, but that is the reality of the situation. So if we're going to talk about individual matchups, Kemba Walker versus Goran Dragic, the way both of these guys have played in the playoffs thus far, it's actually kind of evens out, because Goran's been amazing and Kemba's been pretty questionable. He had 5 points in Game 6 versus the Raptors, and he hasn't shot the ball well, but Kemba is still a better player, and he wins that matchup. I believe they're running Jimmy at the 2 and Duncan Robinson at the 3 in their starting lineup in the playoffs. I could be wrong about that, but taking that assumption, obviously, Jimmy is a better player than Jaylen Brown, though I imagine Jimmy is going to be guarding Jason Tatum quite a bit, and Tatum's going to be guarding Jimmy, so we'll just make that the matchup, as they're the best player in each team. Jason Tatum is a better offensive player than Jimmy Butler, and with his passing getting as good as it has, like, Jason Tatum's passing is not being talked about enough because he's been amazing lately, ever since he's gotten to the bubble, really. He is a better offensive player. Jimmy is probably about better defensive player a little bit, but not by a huge margin. However, he's a better playmaker, better ball handler, and a much better leader. So I think Jimmy is an overall better player, and I think he's overall a little bit more impactful than Jason Tatum. But I do think it's relatively close, and I think this is going to be an interesting matchup. So Jimmy wins that matchup. For Jaylen Brown versus Duncan Robinson, Duncan is a ridiculously good three-point shooter, and he's certainly going to be impactful, but Jaylen Brown wins that matchup. Who are they playing at the 4 right now? They're playing Jay Crowder, and it's going to be basically Jay Crowder versus Gordon Hayward. Obviously, Gordon Hayward wins that, and then Bam Adebayo is obviously a way better player than Daniel Tice. So the Boston Celtics are winning 3 out of the 5 matchups, and the one that they're losing is like just barely out of the 2. So that's interesting. Of course, it doesn't just come down to matchup, and this is where I should talk about the fact that Miami has a lot more bench depth than the Boston Celtics. Both Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero come off of the bench, though Kendrick Nunn has been a little bit iffy in the playoffs. There's also Kelly Olynyk, who is prone to have a good game from 3, Myers Leonard, who's prone to do the same thing. Andre Iguodala is kind of now, but he's not horrible. Boston's bench is atrocious. And it's going to be better once Gordon Hayward comes back, because he should be back for this series. And they're obviously going to bring Marcus Smart off of the bench unless they decide to bring Hayward off of the bench. And either one of those guys is a much better bench player than like Tyler Hero. Still a much weaker bench than the Miami Heat. Another reason why I think the Boston Celtics match up a lot better against the Heat than the Milwaukee Bucks is Brad Stevens is a coach that knows how to make adjustments in the playoffs. No joke, I think barring, Giannis not having that injury that he did, if you replaced Mike Budenholzer with Brad Stevens in that series, I think the Milwaukee Bucks win that series, and I'm not even kidding. I really think that's how impactful and how detrimental Mike Budenholzer's coaching was on the Milwaukee Bucks. So you get Brad Stevens in there, who I would argue is about, I would say him and Eric Spoelstra are pretty much on the same tier. I said in my hot takes video, the most recent one, that Eric Spoelstra is the best coach in the NBA, and I still think that. But Brad Stevens is not that far off. He's actually probably second or third. It depends how you feel about Nick Nurse. I would probably put him second. So Brad Stevens is going to be able to make adjustments. He's gonna, basically the way that Miami beat Milwaukee was another amongst many ways where they beat Milwaukee was Eric Spoelstra completely outcoached Mike Budenholzer by running these unique pick and rolls where it's a bunch of guard pick and rolls, and Milwaukee's drop defense really didn't know what to do with it, and they had their defensive scheme in mind and they ran with it. And when it wasn't working based on the creative stuff that Miami was doing, Mike Budenholzer did not make an adjustment. And we saw how that worked out for them. If Miami and Eric Spoelstra come up with some creative way to mess with the Boston Celtics defense or a creative way to shut down their offense, I promise you Brad Stevens is going to come back with a play of his own and he's going to adjust. And that's a huge factor. So going for Boston, a lot better shot creation, not nearly as great of a matchup for the Heat on both ends of the floor because of said shot creation, as well as Boston's perimeter defense, because they're a perimeter-oriented defensive team due to their lack of interior presence, with Daniel Tice being just an player. So they match up great defensively and offensively versus the Miami Heat. Now, I don't want to make this whole video about why the Celtics will win, because either way I think it's going to be a 7-game series or something close to that, maybe a tight 5 or 6 game series, because sometimes series can be close and they're just 5 games because each team won barely, or each game was won by a team barely out of 5 for 4, you know what I mean. The way Miami would win this series would basically mean Jimmy, Duncan, and I'd say Tyler Hero or Kendrick Nunn really have to go off, because they're going to be even more reliant on their offense in this series than they were in the last series, because really how Miami beat the Bucks was their defense more so than their offense, but their offense was a huge factor in it. I keep saying different reasons why the Heat beat the Bucks, but there is a long list of reasons why. And if Miami's guys are like not putting on a show with their offense, I don't think they can beat the Celtics. Like Jimmy can't go back to averaging like 20 points like he did in the regular season. He's going to have to average like 25 to 30 in this series. I think they're going to need a guy like Tyler Hero or Kendrick Nunn to step up. Goran Dragic is going to continue to score the way he has been, I think. I would really hope that Duncan Robinson has a better series for the Heat, because he did not play that great against the Milwaukee Bucks. He had his moments, but mostly he wasn't really going off like you'd think he will against a team that doesn't defend the three-point line all that much, but he is a very good three-point shooter, and you would hope that he gets some of those shots off. And especially in the bubble where three-point percentages are up, so him going off would be even bigger than it normally would be. So what I would hope from Miami and what I would expect them to need to do in order to beat this Celtics team is Jimmy Butler needs to play great defense on Jason Tatum, which I think that's going to happen. Jason Tatum's a great offensive player, so at the end of the day, I think he's going to be getting buckets, but I do think that Jimmy is going to be able to play good defense on him. And then Miami also needs their offensive guys to really bring up the production, because I don't think you can get by this series with Jimmy just averaging 20 and Duncan Robinson making like 2 3-pointers a game, or Tyler Hero or Kendrick Nunn averaging like 10. Like, you're going to need some of those guys to step up, and I think Jimmy can definitely do it. It's a matter of Duncan, Hero, and Nunn. I also think Goran Dragic's going to be there. So, yeah, I do think Bam Adebayo is going to be impactful defensively, and I wouldn't even be shocked if they actually put him on Tatum at times, just because he's big enough to keep and fast enough to keep up with him on the perimeter while making him basically not a factor in the paint. So that would be an interesting thing to see. But my official prediction for this series is Boston Celtics in 7. And though my playoff prediction record has been a little bit spotty, I also predicted that the Boston Celtics would beat the Raptors. So I have got something right. So yeah, that is the end of this video. Please be sure to like and subscribe for more NBA content like this, and cue the outro music.